Thank you for joining us for this presentation of Policy Action 2023. The purpose of this recording is for us to share with you an overview of the policies that have been brought forward by the people who have helped make this happen. And we're making this video available along with a link to the document that outlines with more details. We're hoping that you will learn more and we'll offer ways for you to help us out by making improvements as we go and to support this legislation as it goes through the legislative process. Policy Action 2023 is unlike anything we've seen before in Maine, an open crowdsourcing process to define a shared goal and then to focus on policy areas within which we can improve laws and regulations to achieve that goal. The goal that was determined by Policy Action 2023 participants is to address barriers and create incentives for equitable, sustainable growth and development that strengthens downtowns and villages of all sizes, while putting development pressure away from productive and open natural areas. We do so acknowledging that Maine has urban, rural, and suburban settings for which any solution may or may not be a fit, and a variety of people who deserve to be welcomed into their community. Some of these proposals are pragmatic, incremental steps, while others will foster deep and long-needed conversations about where and how we encourage development and the natural resource sectors. One key component of Policy Action 2023 is that participants can focus on the policies of most interest to them without an expectation that they are endorsing the entire package. As lead conveners, even Build Maine and Grow Smart Maine present each of these proposals with encouragement to the legislative committees to see this as an important starting point for conversations and decisions that need to happen. We're at a critical time here in Maine. After more than a decade of land use planning and implementation being sidelined, it is now front and center as we strive to address the current housing crisis without undoing the good work related to the climate crisis and without creating a new crisis related to how we protect farmland, forest land, working waterfronts, and open space that are equally critical to Maine's economy, quality of life, and future. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Kara Wilbur, and she will talk about the 8 working groups that we have.
Thank you, Nancy. And thanks to everyone who's been a part of this process that started many months ago. Over the course of these months, the working groups have organized around 8 key topic areas and really drilled down into those topics to arrive at a series of legislative proposals. Those 8 areas include coordination of government, which is looking at growth happening in the right place with coordination of government at all levels. Reworking transportation funding and offering multimodal choices across Maine by reworking that funding. Complete streets action to make it safe and easy to use alternative transportation. Looking at the growth management law to ensure a more flexible planning framework to accommodate changes and best practices in land use and implementation. The state historic rehab tax credit is looking at new ways of strengthening that policy to bring value across Maine with a stronger historic tax credit. Subdivision regulations is looking at development in the right place with revised subdivision rules. Downtown revitalization and open space protection is looking at downtowns and rural areas to strengthen those with enhanced fiscal policies and other strategies. And then finally, carbon neutral buildings is trying to advance state climate goals by encouraging improvements in that area. And so with that, we will dive into each of these policy areas, starting with coordination of government. The first topic area in working group is coordination of government. There are 3 policy proposals that were proposed as part of this working group. The first is LR 1739, an act to provide regional support to deliver state and federal programs to cities and towns This is a working draft that is looking to increase funding for planning resources and capacity at all levels of government, specifically at the state and regional levels. The next one is LR 933, a resolve to repair pre-approved building types. This involves the state developing an open process to create a menu of building types, including construction drawings that meet building and life safety code. Towns can hold their own public process to apply the types locally. If developers choose from this menu of types, they can reduce housing costs by streamlining the regulatory process. This is an opt-in program for municipalities. And this could support efforts from LD 2003 and take advantage of housing opportunity program funding through DECD. And that bill is being sponsored by Matt Pouliot. The next one is LR 1771, an act to increase the supply of housing by updating land use regulations, establishing an alternative permitting process, and decreasing processing time for state approvals of certain housing developments. And this bill, sponsored by Tracy Geer, is looking to enable housing production by providing an alternative fast track approval for affordable housing that's in line with local planning. And that establishes a state board for review of projects that meet local goals. Next is the reworking of transportation funding group.
Thank you, Kara. Our group has been working with sponsor Maggie O'Neill, Representative Maggie O'Neill, on LR 1777, an act to strategically advance the state's public transit infrastructure by reinvigorating the Public Transit Advisory Council and increasing funding. And it does just about that. It seeks to address the systemic lack of public transit funding and coordination in Maine by bolstering state transit planning and assistance, increasing state funding for on-road public transit, and solidifying Maine's commitment to public transit in statute. The bill would amend Title 23 to make an explicit commitment to public transit in MDOT's, that's the Maine Department of Transportation's, decisions on capital investments, transit planning, and projects. It also strengthens the Public Transit Advisory Council at MDOT in order for it to represent stakeholders, to provide frequent recommendations on public transit decisions, and to be a competent body to promote the interests of public transit. Additionally, the bill includes expanding transit planning assistance at MDOT to better coordinate with local and regional transit needs, and increases state contribution to wheeled transit in order to relieve the pressures of local match and to improve the statewide transit system. With that, I'll pass it off to Zoe Miller with Policy Group 3 to talk about Complete Streets Action.
Hey everyone, my name is Zoe Miller and I'm with the Moving Maine Network, and I'm here to talk about the Complete Streets work group suite of bills. Complete Streets is an approach to planning, designing, building, operating, and maintaining streets that enables safe access for all people who need to use them. And that includes pedestrians, bicyclists, folks who use mobility devices, motorists, and transit riders of all ages and abilities. This work group came together with a shared interest in advancing Maine's use of this approach. Maine does have a policy through our Maine Department of Transportation's around complete streets, and many communities, municipalities, both large and small, also have policies, but we saw the need to do more and do better. And so that together, this group of bills addresses many of the levers of change around advancing complete streets. And the first one is an act to establish a thriving corridors program by encouraging affordable housing and mixed use development. This is sponsored by Representative Tracy Geer, and it would enable the Maine Department of Transportation and to work with local downtown groups to work together and focus on street level development in combination with street updates, complete streets treatments. The second one is an act to expand the use of traffic cameras for school and work zones. This is sponsored by Senator Matty Daughtry. The bill would add school and work zones to the places listed in Maine's statute where automated speed enforcement cameras would be permitted. Currently, only school buses and the turnpike are allowed. The third bill is a resolve to establish a task force to recommend strategies to achieve the goal of eliminating traffic fatalities and serious injuries. This is sponsored by Representative Daniel Ankeles. This bill resolves to use a Vision Zero approach, which is being used successfully around the country and around the globe. So to bring that to Maine and to develop recommended strategies for achieving the goal of eliminating traffic fatalities and serious injuries. It would establish a task force made up of people with lived experience of transportation barriers, folks with disabilities, folks who are who have experienced injuries, and along with legislators and staff from the Maine Department of Transportation, and would create a report to the Joint Standing Committee on Transportation. And the fourth bill is an act to grant municipalities the authority to set lower motor vehicle speed limits. This is sponsored by Senator Rick Bennett. This would enable interested municipalities. It would not be a mandate, but it would enable municipalities to make small and reasonable adjustments to their posted speed limits within certain dense and populous contexts, enabling cities to make the call on initiatives like a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit consistently across certain street types. And finally, an act to increase street safety, sponsored by Representative Mark Mallon. This bill establishes roadway project design criteria to support the implementation of Maine Department of Transportation's existing complete streets policy. It would provide some really strong, detailed criteria for how that project is made into a reality in more places.
So I'm going to speak about the work that Policy Action Group 4 has been focused on. We've been looking at the Growth Management Act to provide some much needed updates. We've submitted a bill, LR 1377, an act to update the growth management law. This bill will provide a redline version of the law as a starting point to promote significant and much needed discussion. Our goal is to modernize the law and allow for more focus on implementation strategies and accommodate best practices. The reason this matters, by focusing on implementation, it'll give more flexibility to cities and towns to plan for development in places where it makes sense, rather than continuing to grow through low density sprawl in rural areas as we've been doing for the past 50 years in Maine.
Hi everyone, I am speaking to LR 1684, which is an act to expand the Maine Historic Rehabilitation Tax Credit. This effort comes in a direct response to the 2021 OPEGA report, which said that while Maine's matching federal historic tax credit has been wildly successful in the state, over the last dozen years, it's brought in nearly $750 million of investment. Maine's other program, which is a simple state credit that is not matched by the federal government for commercial projects, has been almost entirely dormant. And so this act is meant to remedy that, to improve Maine's small project credit. It will do two things. It will raise the ceiling of value by which projects can enter that small credit up to $1 million in expenses. And it will raise the credit to 30%, which developers tell us is the necessary amount to make it worthwhile to enter the program. You may consider this a Main Street credit. This is for small commercial projects that bring in revenue, but that are too small to fit into the federal program. And we think it's a tremendous opportunity for the state to start rehabilitating those small commercial projects all over the state. The other thing that this bill does is it expands the historic tax credit to residential properties. Homeowners will be able to access a 25% credit up to $250,000 of rehabilitation expenses on their property. The residential credit is for exterior improvements, and it also encompasses any weatherization improvements made to the property. For both of these credits, there is an affordable housing booster for both a commercial credit and if those residential properties have an in-law apartment or an apartment attached, or they're duplex and owner occupied, those also will enjoy an affordable housing booster if the apartments are rented out at an affordable rate. For the residential credit, there's also a booster. The booster may be eligible for income eligibility of the homeowner. And if a building has been vacant for over 5 years and it's brought back online as a dwelling unit, there's a booster for that as well. We think this credit these improvements to the Maine historic tax credit are important because Maine has among the oldest building stock in the country, and it will apply everywhere geographically in the state. Anywhere where there is a crossroads in the state, there are historic buildings. Many of them, as all of us witness, could enjoy some tremendous improvements. And we think this will be a great leveraging project to get those improvements into those buildings. We know that historic preservation is more intensive in terms of local labor and local building supplies. And we think it will be a boon to the state. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Robert. I'm going to talk about the subdivision regulation working group. There were 2 bills proposed under this working group. The first is LR 1159, an act to increase housing and protect the regional road network, municipal tax base, and working lands. This bill does 3 things. The first is to align with LD 2003 from the last session by exempting lots that have 1 to 3 units from subdivision regulation. And for lots that create 4 to 18 units, to create an administrative review process for those to help encourage infill and development in designated growth areas. And then finally, it removes subdivision development pressure from rural areas as designated locally. The second bill is LR 275. A resolve directing the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry to convene a stakeholder group tasked with a comprehensive overhaul and modernization of the state subdivision statutes. This one will set up a stakeholder group to propose language to modernize the subdivision statute and promote development in growth areas and reduce development pressure in Maine's rural areas. That bill is sponsored by Representative Jack Ducharme, and the first bill is sponsored by Representative Lydia Crafts. Next is downtown revitalization and open space.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chelsea Gazzillo, and I'm the New England Policy Manager for American Farmland Trust. I'm one of the bus drivers for the Downtown Revitalization and Open Space Protection Group. And our group is supporting 2 bills that are currently moving through the state legislature, including LR 1399, an act to increase Maine's housing supply, combat climate change, and preserve rural open spaces by prohibiting communities from large lot zoning practices in areas where public sewer and water infrastructure are available. If passed, this bill supports state planning goals established decades ago by limiting large lot zoning in areas designed for or already built out at high densities, specifically in areas where water and sewer infrastructure are available. The state would preclude minimum lot sizes greater than 5,000 square feet. Within designated growth zones where public water and sewer do not exist and are available, minimum lot sizes greater than 20,000 square feet would be eliminated. This bill is being introduced by Rep. James Boyle, who's a Democrat from the 100th and 9th District. The second bill is LR 1633, an act to establish an infrastructure bank. The intent is to evaluate and recommend strategies for investing in abandoned and underutilized properties. Municipal governments and regional organizations may create incentives for land improvements, including infrastructure, banks, or other means to guarantee loans, and a structure for repayment of those loans for infrastructure projects that served planned areas. This bill is being introduced by Rep. Mark Malone, who's a Democrat from the 133rd District. This bill is of interest to many of the open space and farmland conservation advocates, because we know investing in growth in our underutilized and abandoned properties reduces the amount of farmland and open space development sprawl. Thank you so much. And I'm going to hand it over to Sam now, who's going to go over another bill that our group is working on.
So my project was a part of Group 7, and I've sort of gone off and done my own thing. So my concept is to allow municipalities to tax improvements on land at a lower rate than the underlying value of the land. And so that's what I'm trying to do on the state level. Improvements on land include things like buildings are the obvious version, but that also includes things like irrigation or paths and roads. Like if you have a farm and you have a lot of land, you might have roads, and those roads would count as improvements, or silos. So improvements on land is not just limited to buildings in that context.
What we'll do, Sam, is I think share with folks as well that though this didn't make it into a bill, it has been part of the Policy Action 2023, and we're looking for other opportunities to incorporate this idea into legislation so that it can move forward while you're actually getting an opinion from the Attorney General's office on the constitutionality of the idea, because there are mixed opinions there.
Thanks to all of the previous presenters. My name is Naomi Beal. I'm the Executive Director of Passive House Maine, and I am talking about a bill today. LR 271 is an act to support lower home energy costs. It's sponsored by Rebecca Millette. We're really happy to be working with her. This bill could also be called something like an act relating to energy labeling of residential buildings. And the general concept is that the state institute a volunteer audit system for buildings that would pop up at point of sale or perhaps at change of occupancy. And with the audit information revealed regarding energy usage, consumers can make educated decisions about buying or renting space. Actually, just as I'm not going to talk about renting because that's a whole other thing. The idea is for Maine to institute a volunteer audit system for buildings at point of sale or at change of occupancy. When with the audit, we can get greater information regarding energy usage, regarding carbon emissions, which will be helpful for the state calculating our carbon loads and reductions required, and will be helpful for consumers to make educated decisions about where they're staying based on energy costs. The audit will also be part of it will point people to existing rebates and incentives that are already held by Efficiency Maine Trust and are being used to varying degrees. This is the audit system is meant to point people in the right direction to get them connected to existing programs and actually use those funds to improve the buildings, either before the point of sale or after. Various levels of information will be included in those. So the audit will point people in the direction of the existing programs, and then also provide some assumptions about what the improvements will actually reflect. The overarching concept of improving the energy efficiency and reducing greenhouse gases is critical in meeting our state's climate goals, and making information about the efficiency and greenhouse gases also keeps our homeowners and consumers better informed in general. We find the evaluation of buildings also become based on their energy ratings is a critical piece of this and is an advantage for all consumers. Thanks very much.
I want to thank all of the members of the working groups who helped to present today the bills that are part of Policy Action 2023. Thank Build Maine for being such a key partner with GrowSmart Maine and making all of this happen as co-collaborators. And to thank those of you who are watching this. You will see at the end of this video links to the document again. And you'll see this, both the video and links to the document out on social media. Please share so that we can get the word out about these amazing proposals. Won't you join us in Policy Action 2023 as the work continues? We are planning a live Zoom meeting with the people from the working groups and the sponsors that will come in a couple of weeks to dive into some of these bills. Again, we're looking for those who support. We're looking for ideas for improvement as we go forward. So if you're interested in working with the sponsors and the people who have helped to define, design, and draft this legislation, stay tuned for when that live Zoom will be, and looking for ways that you can engage in one bill that you care about or in the overall suite of bills that we've proposed. Thank you, and we look forward to talking with you again.